Y'all are never gonna believe where I saw a Go reference lately. My fiance and I have been watching the original Pokemon series, the Indigo League one, the very original series. It's on Netflix, and there's a Go board somewhere in the Pokemon world, believe it or not. I don't know how many of you know this. I certainly didn't. I feel like most of you are not aware that a Go board exists and or appears in Pokemon. But it was a funny little clip. I was just kind of like casually watching this episode. It's episode 44 called A Chansey Operation. And a bunch of Pokemon had been in an accident. They all have to go to the hospital. The hospital, not the Pokemon Center, because, I don't know, the Pokemon Center is too far or something. And there's this Chansey there. And the Chansey is helping Meowth with Meowth's injury. Meowth, the Team Rocket Meowth, of course. It's kind of gross. His charm, his like coin on top of his head, he loses it. And it's just this little like weird spot on his forehead that looks kind of gross, where like it's supposed to have the coin there, but it's not there. And so he's really upset and he wants his charm back, and he's like whining for his charm, and he's whining at the Chansey to get his charm back. He's like, I want my charm. And the Chansey comes back with a cup of rice and puts it on Meowth's forehead, and it's like, that's not my charm. And he takes it off and he throws it away. And then Chansey comes back with another thing, a full-on Gobon, a floor Gobon with some ghost stones on it. And she puts that on Meowth's head, and there's a little, comical moment there. But I was shocked to see a Go board in Pokemon. Not really what I was expecting. And I, of course, had to count the lines on the Gobon. There are two shots of it. The first shot, it's a 15 by 20 board. The shapes on it do not look like a real game. It looks kind of, I don't know, maybe you could pass it off as a beginner game. And then the next shot of it turned into a 13 by 15 board. So clearly they're not counting. They're just kind of drawing in whatever lines. They didn't do any research on that. But I thought it was pretty cool that there was a Go. But maybe there's more. Maybe there's more I don't know about. But I thought that was a very unlikely place to see a Go board. You're listening to Starpoint, the show about Go for Go fans away from the board. And before I get into the meat of today's episode, there are two really, really exciting things happening in the Go world. The movie is coming to Netflix. It should be on Netflix now by the time this episode is released. And I didn't expect it so soon. All of a sudden, I just opened up Netflix and it was like, coming this Wednesday, The Match. And I'm so stoked. I will definitely do an episode on The Match, so keep an eye out for that. But I won't talk about it too much now. That'll be on the episode. The other piece of news is there is a Netflix show. It's another Netflix-related thing. It's a very Netflix-oriented opening act of Starpoint today. There's a Netflix show called The Devil's Plan. Some of you may be aware of it because, or maybe you like Korean reality TV shows, so you watch them, or you took an interest in this show, as I did, because there is a Go player who featured on it named GoPro Yeonu. And GoPro Yeonu is a very famous and popular Go YouTuber, a professional Korean Go player, and she was on The Devil's Plan. And the premise of this show, The Devil's Plan, is they just get a whole bunch of smart people and then put them in a room and then give them a whole bunch of games to do to compete with each other. And like smart people like Go players, right? Or doctors and lawyers, and there's a science YouTuber, things like that, right? So it's like a brainiac reality TV show. That was season 1. Season 2 is coming out soon, and you'll never believe who's on season 2 of The Devil's Plan. Yes, it is a Go player. It's another Go player, which I didn't expect. I thought they were going to be one and done with the Go player thing. I thought they were just going to find other people and just, that Go player thing was just a thing that would happen in the first season. Yes, it is another professional Go player. but no, they have been they're not active and they've retired, Lee Sedol will be in season 2 of The Devil's Plan. You can check out the trailer. I will link the trailer in the description. It is incredible. I can't believe they got Lee Sedol to do this. And it's not just us Go players who are excited about this. This is huge for everyone involved in the show. You can see in the trailer even, everybody is just kind of in awe of Lee Sedol. Lee Sedol is not just some B-list celebrity in Korea. Everybody knows who he is. I would say Lee Sedol is more famous in Korea than, let's say, Magnus Carlsen or Gary Kasparov is in the West. Depending on, obviously, if you're going to go to Norway, you're going to know who Magnus Carlsen is and so on. But in general, Korean stars, the ones that kind of are quasi famous in the Western world, are super duper famous in their native country, right? So this is huge. I'm so excited to watch that. Really, really cool stuff. Really good week for Netflix in the world of Go. But on to today's episode. I'm actually pretty excited to talk about what I'm going to talk about today. But before I get into the actual topic, we'll start off with a little bit of an exercise here. So let's say I gave you 3 numbers, 2, 4, and 6. 2, 4, 6. And I tell you that these numbers follow a certain rule. There is some kind of rule underlying these numbers. And your task is to find out what rule that is by asking me whether 3 other numbers follow that rule. And you can do this as many times as you want. So you can ask your set of 3 numbers, and I will tell you either yes or no. Yes, it follows the rule, or no, it doesn't. It's kind of like the I'm bringing such and such to the picnic game. I don't know how many of you know what I'm talking about. But we can't really do this exercise without this kind of an actual dialogue. So I'll kind of suppose what you're thinking. Maybe just kind of use your brain to exercise what you might do to try to figure out what the underlying rule is, what your plan of action is to find out what is the rule behind this 2, 4, 6 pattern. And so one of the first combinations you may try might be something like 8, 10, 12, right? If you were to ask me, does 8, 10, 12 follow that rule? I would say yes, it does. Okay, so maybe you have some other ideas. Maybe you want to make sure, and you try something like 14, 16, 18. I would say also yes. Have you thought of another set that I haven't mentioned that it doesn't really follow what I am saying? I don't know, 1, 2, 3, perhaps? Well, I would tell you that 1, 2, 3 also follows the rule. Now, suppose you have these sets of numbers that you're proposing to me, and I keep saying yes. What is wrong with this pattern of thinking? The pattern of thinking is not going to be effective in finding out what the rule is because it's not trying to falsify the theory underlying it. So, for example, you might think, oh, the theory is the rule is that you have to go in even numbers ascending by 2s. So you're going to try that. Okay, maybe you're going to be a little more creative and say, okay, maybe it's just any kind of set of numbers ascending, whether it's by 2s or by 1s or whatever. And that's what you try, and then you get it. When you try to figure out this rule, the best strategy is to come up with a hypothesis, verify as well as falsify that theory. So if your initial theory is 2, 4, 6 follows even number increments of 2, increasing, then try decreasing. And if I say yes, then you know your rule is wrong. If I say no, then you know you're still on the right track. The actual rule underlying 2, 4, 6, they're just ascending numbers. So if you were to try 400, 899, 3000, I would have said yes. But the point here is, a lot of people, when they try to figure something like this out, they focus so much on their own theory of how things may work, and they just try to confirm that theory rather than trying to test what's wrong with it, find out the failures of their theory. And so that is kind of the topic I'm talking about today. It comes from a book called Black Box Thinking by Matthew Syed. And the subtitle is Why Most People Never Learn from Their Mistakes, But Some Do. And that title alone intrigues me because it felt so closely related to Go improvement mentality. And I picked it up, I read through it, and all throughout the book, I took notes on what I felt was the most relevant stuff when it comes to studying Go. Now, the book itself, it's mostly to do with systematic black box thinking, like organizational stuff, like, oh, why do certain organizations and fields fail at learning from their mistakes, whereas some excel at it? So it's not always going to apply to the individual level that we have when we play Go, right? But a lot of them do apply to our theme of Go. One of the major themes is the contrasting approaches of the medical field versus the aviation field. In fact, that's one of the things that they open with. So apparently in the world of aviation, well, this is where the term black box comes from, right? The black box is this very, very shielded and secured box in the plane that has all of the data from the flight fed into it, so that if the plane crashes and something goes wrong and you can't ask the pilot what happened, you have this black box which has a load of information of what happened before the crash, so they can learn from that mistake. And apparently right now it's not a black box anymore. It used to be, but now it's an orange box, so they can find it better. But they have this black box. So the whole book is about black box thinking. Like, how do we learn from our mistakes? How do we make sure we keep track of our failures so that we can move forward? And so this reflects in the aviation field because you may be aware that flying is one of the most safest forms of travel out there. It's actually far safer than driving itself. And that is partly due to the culture in aviation that just completely hones in on any kind of mistake or catastrophe imaginable. Whereas the medical field has a long way to go, according to the author. They try to cover up their mistakes. When a doctor makes a mistake, it is a matter of integrity and honor for the doctor, so they don't necessarily frame the situation as a mistake. They say things like, oh, the patient had complications, right? Instead of like, I failed to do this. And so that makes it very difficult for them to identify what went wrong and improve. So it's a bit of a call to action, and that obviously has connections with our mentalities as Go players. If we are completely ignoring our mistakes, then we're never going to learn from them. So I thought this had a lot of lessons that I don't know how many of these lessons I will get through today. This may be a two-parter, but we'll see how far we get. The first thing that I want to talk about here in this book, attention as a resource. So one of the studies that was talked about in the books, a bunch of students were given certain tasks between easy and difficult, right? So two groups of students, one with easy tasks and another with difficult tasks. For example, the students were given the task of reading out loud as an easy task, and the other students were given the task of defining difficult words as a task. So you might imagine that reading out loud is a pretty brainless task as long as you're literate. Whereas defining difficult words, it's like you have to be not only literate, but proficient in literacy as well as cognitive function and comprehension and things like that. So very vastly different tasks. And at the end of the task, the students were asked, how long do you think you spent doing that? The easy task students made relatively accurate responses as to the estimate of time, how much time has passed. The students who were given the difficult task underestimated the time by 40%. Now, what does this tell us about how our brains work? It means that when we are so focused on something that is challenging to us, time moves faster. And there's actually an example in the book that is super tragic, and like the professionals just did not know how much time was going by, and because of that, the tragedy happened. But this just completely reminds me of what happens in a game of Go when you are playing and you suddenly become engrossed in a local problem of life and death or Tsuji, and you're just completely committed to reading the thing, and the time is just sinking and it's just flying away. And so the lesson here is that attention itself and focus, although it is good and it helps us solve problems, it's a resource in and of itself, and it saps other resources, and we may be unaware. So that is why sometimes, like I say, like what makes Go so challenging is that we have this tactical side, but we also have to zoom out to the strategic side, and that kind of inner outer dichotomy of like zooming in, zooming out is very difficult and jarring for our brains to handle, but very important as Go players. So that's attention as a resource. So that's one thing that I learned. Another thing that was interesting that I think is that I can relate to our Go games is something you may have heard before. This one's a little bit more famous. And it's also talked about in one of the Malcolm Gladwell books as well. And in fact, this book, if you like Malcolm Gladwell books, although I would say Malcolm Gladwell books are slightly better than this one, but if that's the kind of book you like, that's the kind of book this is, Black Box Thinking. But this example is bullet holes on a plane in World War II in fighter planes. So when fighter planes came back in World War II, it's like you would look at the bullet holes on the fighter plane, especially in the areas where you would see the most bullet holes, and say, okay, that is a very critical area where the plane is getting shot a lot, and so I'm going to put armor on those spots. And that makes sense, right? That kind of like logically common sense kind of approach. Like, look where the bullet holes are on the plane and put the armor where you see the most bullet holes. But that is not the right thing to do, as they learned. The bullet holes on the planes that were returning were actually bullet holes that were non-fatal because the planes themselves were returning. The planes that weren't returning, the ones that led to the planes crashing, those bullet holes were not being analyzed because they were not there for analysis. So the opposite was found to be true. You should put more armor in all of the spots that the bullet holes were not, because the only reason the plane came back was because it was not shot in those areas which were completely vital, like the cockpit and the tail. And so it's kind of misleading here to just kind of look at the bullet holes on the plane, only looking at the planes that return from battle, right? So this, to me, sounds like analyzing only your won games, right? Let's say you're someone who likes to play Go, and every time you lose a game, you don't want to look at it. You just kind of shove it aside, and you're like, I don't want to think about this. But when you win a game, you feel good. You're like, oh, okay, I feel great about this game. I like how that game went. And so I don't mind looking through it and seeing what I can learn, what could I've done better. And doing that again and again is really just like analyzing the bullet holes of just the planes that returned alive. You're just looking at all the mistakes that you made that were not critical, that did not lose you the game. Now, obviously, sometimes you will make mistakes that are game-losing mistakes, critical mistakes, and yet you still won the game because they also made critical mistakes. But by and large, you're going to want to analyze the games that you lost, because those are the ones where you made the mistakes that led you to lose for sure. Another theme talked about in this book is the concept of feedback, and that is a huge thing in Go, because I think that's what makes Go so challenging, because there's a lot of delayed feedback. The author talks about how delayed feedback is not good for improving intuitive judgment. The example given is the example of radiologists analyzing mammograms to detect whether there's cancer or anything like that. And they diagnose it. They say, look, okay, I think this one's fine. And then they say, I think this one, there's a problem and they need surgery. And after they do that, they go home, and like weeks later, after the surgery occurs, they find out, oh, actually, you were wrong. There was nothing wrong here. There was something else. And the radiologist goes, oh, I see. And there's no way for that connection to be made between the initial judgment and that feedback that came way, way later. So what do they do to solve this problem? Radiologists, what they do is they study a library of existing mammograms that they know the answers to already, so previous historical mammograms. And so they can train it so that they can look at the mammogram, detect whether something is wrong or not, give the answer, get the answer right away. Now, this is why Go is so hard. A lot of our mistakes spawn into other mistakes, and 20 moves later down the line, you will face the consequences of the mistake you made. And that's what's so hard about Go. I think somebody I saw on a chess video kind of commented it like, oh, chess, you know you made your mistake the move after you made your move. Go, you know you made your mistake 20 moves after you made your move. So that's why it's so challenging. And when you play so many games in Go, you will find that your tactical fighting ability, your local reading ability will improve quite quickly, but because you have a lot of feedback to work off of. But your opening and overall strategic moves, it will be very difficult to hone without somebody teaching, because it's just so hard to tell what you did wrong early on that led to other things. And that's also the weakness of, let's say, correspondence games, these long format games, because you'll make a move and then the next day you'll get punished for it. And although it's not as bad as the weeks later mammogram, in some cases it can be, where if you're playing multiple correspondence games or somebody's taking a particularly long time on a move, so that game has kind of washed away from your brain and you have to come back to it and you have to recalibrate. All of that stuff, I think, is kind of makes it challenging to get the right amount of feedback. So there are a few things that we can maybe do to mitigate this very challenging aspect of Go. One of the things that we do is study pro games, and not just pro games, but other players' games. So if you're a weaker player who just completely does not understand pro games, I would suggest finding on OGS a game of somebody who is a few ranks higher than you, so that you're looking at something that it's a little above your level, so that you can learn from it. And just looking through the game and analyze and kind of follow along and try to judge what is going on and what you would do in the situation. And then you'll have direct feedback, and it's a good way to train yourself without actually playing game after game. And it's I think it's like a 1-to-1 comparison to the mammogram technique here that the radiologists use. Later on, the book also mentions how some soccer players try to increase the feedback they get while they play soccer, or obviously football in other parts of the world. But they play on smaller fields so that they can get more interactions with the ball, right? So it's a more concentrated action zone. And so similar comparison in Go would be to play 9x9 games, right? You have more action, you have more fighting experience on a smaller board. I think even doing life and death problems is kind of a version of that. You're trying to get the most action out of a single experience, whereas playing a full game will include a lot of opening stuff and end game stuff and things like that. So if you really want to hone your fighting ability, you might want to go for smaller boards or life and death problems. Okay, next thing I want to talk about here, this is actually quite fascinating, and it's like a theme that I always think about in improvement in Go. But the question I always ask myself, like, should you play fast games or should you play long, serious games, right? Or what's the best or optimal amount of games that you should be playing? So this experiment shed a little light on that. And a group of people were split up into two, and there were students of pottery. Okay. Group A was told, you will be graded on the best pot that you make in the next, I don't know how many weeks or whatever. So Group A, make the best pot possible, and your best pot will be graded. Group B, your task is simply to make as many pots as possible. You will be graded on the cumulative weight of your pots. So if you make 20 pounds of pots, you get a C. If you make 50 pounds of pots, you get a B, right? 100 pounds of pots, you get an A+. Something like that, right? So Group A is just completely focused on making the best perfect pot for the best grade. Group B is focused on making as many pots as possible. It doesn't matter what quality pots there were. It just matters how many pots they made. And so what do you expect out of this? You would expect Group B to make a bunch of bad pots and Group A to make a small amount of very good pots. But the surprising thing is that Group B ended up just making the better pots because they put in so much more work than Group A. They put in so much more practice, even though they weren't so concerned about making the best pot possible. The sheer volume of pots that they made, it made them better than Group A, who were just hemming and hawing and trying to theorize and perfect the pot way too much without getting enough practice in. Now, obviously, there are a lot of caveats to this, right? It needs to be of some quality if you're in Group B. If you're just picking off pieces of clay and clenching your hand to make a pot and throwing them in a pile, that's obviously not going to be, you're obviously not going to make better pots than Group A. So there is a, standard amount of effort needed. So what does this tell us about how we practice our Go? Well, I've always been the proponent of play a lot of fast games, and then this also is the proverb: lose your first 50 games as fast as possible. That is always a thing that we always say, and there's a reason for that, right? We focus too much, especially in the beginning, on trying to figure out the game and not enough on just playing. And playing teaches us a lot. So I think I always try to gravitate towards this approach of just like getting myself to play as much as I can. Obviously, there are situations where you've played so much and yet you're not improving. And at that point, you do need to reevaluate. You do need to take a look at what you're doing and strategize and get that Group A mentality back in there and think about what you're doing so you can take the next steps to improve. But I think the vast majority of people, their problem is not a Group A problem, but a Group B problem where, well, I guess, I don't know if I switched those two. But the problem that most people have is they don't make enough pots. They try to make the best pot possible. Kind of like the folks I talked about last week, I would guess they are playing a game or two, getting really upset at them not getting it and kind of writing that Reddit post, instead of just playing game after game after game and allowing their brains to soak up some knowledge. So, I mean, you can take this study with a grain of salt, but I'm very convinced by this whole make as many pots as possible method. The next topic here I have is called the topic of marginal gains. And this actually relates to a few episodes back when I talked about the holistic view of improvement. But what would you think, this is in the sports world. Who would win, a player who ate a healthy breakfast or one who ate not an unhealthy breakfast, but just not as healthy, right? If you were playing these two players in anything, chess, tennis, or whoever, you would think okay, that breakfast isn't going to really make that much of a difference in the game, right? You have hours of practice that you put in, you have all these other things. Just because one player ate a little bit better in the morning versus the other, you're not really going to get that much of a difference. Maybe you'll get a 1% increase, 1% chance increase. Like let's say they're dead even, and then one player eats slightly better breakfast, that player might win. Okay, let me ask the same question about a player who slept 20 more minutes than the other player. Again, you're going to kind of think okay, you know what? Yeah, sleep is very important, but just sleeping 20 more minutes, I don't know, there may be a 2% chance that one player who slept a little more will do better, but so many other factors are contributing more to the result. Okay, same question. What about a player who had better shoes, or a player who did a little pre-game meditation? Now, all of these don't seem to be super significant. If just all you had to do to win and be the best player in the world at anything, and you just had to get the best shoes, then you would just get the shoes. But what if one player did all of those things and more things that were just 1% difference things, and the other player didn't? You would be far more likely to win than the other player. And this is a concept pioneered by Sir Dave Brailsford, who was a cycling coach, and this is the concept of marginal gains. So basically, it's kind of a popular thing in the sports world now, but it was pioneered by him in cycling, where you would just take all the small things, the small little things that you just don't think will really make that drastic of a difference, but you do know that it makes an incremental marginal difference, and you just do all of them, and you add them all up, and you realize that makes a huge difference going together. So that really spoke to me in terms of what I experienced with when I had been studying all sorts of things in Go, and then I went back to my live games, and I realized that not one of those things was the reason I improved, but it was a combination of everything. And I think it really reminds me that Go is really like a language. You don't just learn it in one night. You need to build up a large vocabulary, word by word, to speak it well, and you do that by learning one word at a time. And so sometimes we expect a little training session of one thing to really take us long distances in the world of improvement and Go. But if you keep at it and you keep chipping away at it, all these little things, they start to add up. And I think that's a good lesson to be mindful of. Okay, I got a few more. Next one is be as wrong as fast as you can. And I talked about this earlier with the whole POTS thing, because that's kind of similar to that. But the author in Black Box Thinking talks about being as wrong as fast as you can. And that's just literally straight up a Go proverb. Lose your first 50 games as quickly as possible. I'll read a quote here from Andrew Stanton, who is the director of Finding Nemo and Wall-E. My strategy has always been be wrong as fast as we can, which basically means we're going to screw up. Let's just admit that. Let's not be afraid of that. But let's do it as fast as we can so we can get to the answer. You can't get to adulthood before you go through puberty. I won't get it right the first time, but I will get it wrong really soon, really quickly. So I think that's a simple lesson Not only in the fact of just trying to play as many games as possible without really thinking about if you're going to win or not, but also during the games to not just play what you know, but try to learn from the game by applying yourself and coming up with theories. And if a move looks good to you, but you haven't played it before, you got to find out, right? You got to play it and see what happens. Otherwise, you're just going to kind of crystallize your lower level gameplay and it will never improve, and you will just kind of be comfortable where you're at. And without experimenting, without branching out further, without trying different things that you've never tried before, you will have a hard time improving. David Beckham was in the book as well, not as like a person interviewed or anything, but he was mentioned in the book, and it was actually really inspiring for me. So I'm not a huge soccer or football guy, but I mean, David Beckham's a big enough name that I recognize that name. And the story of his childhood was that he was like a 6-year-old doing keep-ups, like trying to keep the ball up as many times as possible, right? So just kicking the ball up again and again using your head and such. His mother, quote, "I was amazed at how devoted he was. He would start when he got back from school and then continue until his dad got back from work. Then they would go down to the park to practice some more. He was such an amazing kid when it came to his appetite for hard work." And in the beginning, he was able to do like 5 or 6. 6 months in, he was able to do 50 keep-ups. And then a year in, he was able to do 200 keep-ups. So that's just sitting there, just hitting the ball up 200 times straight without letting it drop. And by the time he was 9 years old, he was able to do 2,003 keep-ups. That is crazy. And it took 15 minutes to do the full 2,003 keep-ups. I mean, imagine, I can only imagine how happy he was once he passed the 2,000 mark and then decided to keep going a couple more, but probably his excitement took over and he dropped the ball at 2003. But that is incredible to start off in the beginning at 5 or 6 at literally 6 years old, and then at 9 years old, 2003 keep-ups. And it just like that amount of intense devotion and dedication, especially at that young age, it wakes me up. Like I realize that I question my method way too much when it comes to study and go. I look at, like, what am I doing? Like, am I doing enough Sumego? Should I be studying Joseki? Should I be doing this? Or, I should spend more time doing... None of that was in David Beckham's mind. He was just doing keep-ups. Like, he's like, I want to be, like, the greatest soccer player ever. Well, in his head, he's like, I want to be the greatest football player ever. And then he's like, doing keep-ups, and he's like not for 1 second questioning whether that's good for his game or whether that's going to take him to stardom or whether that's going to help him win more games. He's just doing them because he knows that's related, and he's just like he knows that it will give him better ball control. And I need to be more like that and just be like, you know what, I don't know if this is the right method, but I love it, and I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to just hammer at these life and death problems. I'm going to hammer at these games. I'm just going to keep playing and playing and playing. I question my method way too much like the Group A of the pottery people. So this amount of passion for the game is really, really inspiring to hear about. It really inspires me to work harder. And it reminds me of Lee Sedol spending hours after the AlphaGo game to analyze it, because when I heard that, when I was watching the documentary, that he went home and analyzed his game for hours after he played AlphaGo, I was like, I have never analyzed any game for hours. Like, how can you possibly do that? I'm like in awe of that, right? And so I'm just thinking like how much passion you can possibly have for this game that that can really take you somewhere. And like, it's really admirable to see these people. Obviously, these are superstars, right? And obviously, they're going to have superstar backgrounds. But I think us, us peasants down here, us Q players, humble Q players, can learn a thing or two from these people. And if you look around, if you look at the strong players around you, you'll find similar levels of, well, maybe not this intense level of dedication, but you will find really, really big levels of dedication all around you if you look for it. So all in all, this book, honestly, it was a very easy read, and I would recommend it to people who are into things like Malcolm Gladwell books and just like essays with a bunch of research and stories and anecdotes that support a single theme. Then this is a good book for you. But it really made me think about how we as Go players can approach improvement in Go and how we can approach our games to yield better results. And a lot of the things, since the author Matthew Syed was talking about systematic problems and systematic overhauls, it made me think, like, is there a systematic overhaul that we can apply to our approach to playing the game? For example, in the Toyota factory, there was this alarm system where if somebody made some kind of mistake, someone would pull the alarm and everyone would be briefed on what happened. And I was wondering, like, is there a way we can apply that kind of alarm system in our own play? Like when we play a game and we are reviewing it, like, are there certain things we should watch out for where we kind of pull an alarm and we just give ourselves some time to review what happened? One of the final points of this book is that the tendency to cover up our own mistakes is our greatest downfall, and there's a pattern among the people who do that. There are expert PhD economists who fail to predict inflation. There are doctors who have harmed their patients, and yet they phrase it as like it was just not in the cards. Politicians who go into wars and then they justify it afterwards, even though everybody knows it was the wrong decision. Prosecutors who convict the innocent and then they just stay convinced that the innocent was actually guilty, even after multiple rounds of evidence that exonerates them. We can't play Go like this, right? This isn't the way we would learn from our Go game. But the pattern here is the people who do this the most are the ones who have the most sense of status and public recognition and things like that, because it feeds into our inclination to cover up our flaws and hide those mistakes, and that's what prevents us from improving. So the lesson here is, don't try to be so prideful of your current place and rest on your laurels and Go. Don't be so prideful of your rank and status and Go. Otherwise, you may become like this and you may have this false sense of I'm always right, and you won't be able to improve anymore, and then you will become just stuck in your old ways. So hopefully you learned a thing or two from my summary of the book. It was quite a lot of meat to it. If you are interested in more of the stories, I highly recommend checking out Black Box Thinking by Matthew Syed. Let's learn to watch Baduk TV. Now, this word is not actually a Go term per se, but honestly, I feel like it should have been one of the first words I taught you guys because it's said very, very often. This term is 인공지능, and this word means AI, 인공지능. So whenever you hear somebody on Baduk TV saying I'm getting tongue-tied. 인공지능. 인공지능 means AI. So they'll say something like with that word, and then they'll like demonstrate some kind of AI sequence, or you'll hear the word whenever there's like some sudden drop in AI evaluation. They will say something with a sentence, including the word 인공지능. There's a lot of themes in that book that I want to maybe revisit and dive deeper into for like full episodes. I've kind of done that already because, like for example, the holistic or marginal improvements episode would be kind of like the holistic view of improvement episode. But I think there's more I can kind of look into. So I'm going to continue my search for all the wisdom of improvement and not necessarily be like David Beckham, because I'm truly just interested in the process of improvement as well. And it's not just my end-all be-all goal to be the best in Go, but also to learn about all these other things as well. It's also interesting to me. So have slightly different goals there. But now it's time for the DDK Advice Corner, and the tip of the day is attach, hane, extend. Now this is like the atom, the atomic sequence of Go. When there's an attachment, you hane. And then once that hane occurs, you extend. This simple sequence is so fundamental. You'll see it in Joseki, you'll see it in mid-game sequences, you'll see them just everywhere. So pay attention to that, apply it to your game, learn it. Obviously, you're not always going to do it. You're not always going to hane on an attach, and you're not always going to extend on a hane, but it is a fundamental move, like a basic punch and a basic kick. And you need to know it, and you need to know that that is a normal thing to do. So keep an eye on it. Look at when your opponents do it, look at when pros do it, and consider it in your own games. Attach, hane, extend. And now it's time for listener mail. Sadaharu writes, I think Nongshim Cup is not just exciting because of the team aspect, but because of the format as well. Instead of the usual 3v3 or 5x5, 5v5 team matches, where all the players play at the same time, it's a series of 1v1 where the loser leaves and the winner stays. If your own team is winning, you'll want to see the player last longer in the ring, while if the other team is winning, you'll want to come up with strategies to bring down the winning player. It's also fun to see how long someone can stay in the ring. Too bad there aren't many tournaments with this format. I agree, I really like that kind of like 5 lives format. It is very interesting. I think it is another aspect of why the Nongshim Cup is so interesting. I'm curious to see if they ever put their strongest player first. Like, imagine Shinjinso at the front, and then everybody else on the team is just kind of like, well, I don't know if we'll get to play. But I guess, you know, it's probably better to put him at the back of the line. Another format is Consultation Go, where all the team players combine as one to fight while discussing the game. But what I heard is that this is very tiring, as there will be a lot of arguments, and it may even be worse than playing alone, lol. Another similar format is taking turns to play different parts of the game. For example, player 1 plays the first 25 moves, player 2 plays the next 25 moves, and player 3 plays the remaining moves. The remaining players who are not playing are allowed to discuss the game, but they are not allowed to convey it directly to the player who is currently playing. They do have the right to pause the game for a fixed number of times to call back the player and discuss with him directly. The player himself can also exercise this right to pause. I played in this format in an international tournament before. While it was fun, it's also kind of stressful to be the first few players because you may end up resigning before you even pass on to the next player, lol. Those are both fun formats. I'll comment on the first format. So I saw something similar in I think it was a Botez sisters video in the chess world, where it was like, I don't know, I think it was like the Botez sisters versus a whole bunch of noobs in chess, and they were able to, I forget what the teams were, but it was something like this, where it was like 1 strong player versus like 5 not as strong players, and the 5 were allowed to converse with each other. And yeah, it did take a long it felt like it took a long time for them to agree on certain moves, and I don't know if I would be interested in participating in something like that, because oh man, that's like the definition of too many cooks in the kitchen, right? The second one seems a little more interesting to me. I think that's really cool because like it's like one player can be the opening master, second player be the fighting master, third player be the end game master. Maybe instead of restricting the number of moves, you can just do like a tag team thing where it's like after player 1 feels like their expertise has gone dry, and then they want to pass on the torch to the next player, they can say like, okay, it's your turn now. Although I guess that could, if there's no restriction at all, that could lead to just one player playing the whole game. So I don't know. But anyway, it's interesting that you got to play this format, but Yeah, that's that is definitely a valid concern. It's like you're the end game player, and the first two players just mess up the game completely. So it's like you don't really get a chance to do anything. But thanks for sharing. That was very interesting, Sadaharu. And Crispy Toast writes, I think it would be a good idea to have the 3v3 style tournaments at big tournaments and events like Go Congress. Rank would be averaged as a team, and if you couldn't find a team, you could sign up as an individual and get matched with a group. But now that we are getting more pros in North America, I think a team tournament match would be interesting and a good chance for content creation. Announce the teams 3 months before the tournament, have the teams work together to improve/compete for the first seat, stream their practice matches and reviews, all building up to the single team match. I think these are all great suggestions, Crispy Toast. It would be great to see a team event at a Congress, although I've never been to a Go Congress yet, so I don't really know what the organization is. All I know is that you guys play a whole bunch of games throughout the week, and it's rated, and it's really fun, and it's a good time. But Go Congress would be a perfect place for a team tournament format because there's just so many people. I think as we get more pros in North America, having these team formats would definitely spark more interest and create some drama and some pizzazz in the Go world. So I like your ideas. Thanks for writing in. And then Spiros writes, love the article, looking forward to watching the movie. Best podcast ever. Oh, that's so sweet and kind of you. Thank you so much. And Merrick writes, thank you. And thank you, Merrick. So the question of the week this week, do you turn a blind eye to your mistakes, or do you analyze them? Do you pick them apart? Are you the type to focus and over-focus on your mistakes, or are you the type to kind of turn away and just think, I'm not going to look at those? I am the second type. I'm the one who doesn't want to look at their mistakes, and I just don't like reviewing games when I've lost them, and I actually really like reviewing games when I've won them, which is counterproductive, according to this episode of Starpoint and Black Box Thinking by Matthew Syed. So if you want to share your thoughts on that question, or if you have a Go story to share or have a question of your own, leave a comment wherever you found this episode, or email me directly at starpointpaduk@gmail.com. That's starpointbaduk@gmail.com. If you're a YouTube listener, I would greatly appreciate a like and a subscribe. And if you're a podcast listener, reviews and ratings always help. A very special thank you to James B. and Tristan for supporting Starpoint. If you want to support the show, you can go to ko-fi.com/starpointpaduk, that's KO-FI, or check out the Starpoint store at store.starpointpaduk.com. Did you ever hear about the guy who ate so many Go Stones? Like he consumed so many Go Stones that his intestines grew and expanded and eventually exploded all over the floor, all over the Goban. It was extremely gory. Gory. Thanks for listening. Keep playing Go.